Hi people. Honestly, I don't consider GP to be a subject that can easily be studied for because of the lack of predictability in terms of what may be tested, and also the lack of a limit as to the knowledge that you can acquire for GP. Because of those two factors, I felt that it was the least of my priorities in terms of studying for A-levels. It requires the least consistency for me, and I only prepared for my GP paper about 2 weeks before my GP exam. I won't be focusing much on comprehension because comprehension shouldn't be a new thing. Comprehension requires you to apply the same skill that you applied in PSLE. The only difference is that the words get harder, the passages get a bit more difficult to understand, and vocabulary gets harder as well. I think a bit of practice does help, but then again, the passages keep changing, the topics change all the time. Vocab, they can test you any amount of vocab. So I would think that the best way to build your English foundation is just to read widely. I think books really help a lot because when you're reading the news, they tend to use very simplified English so that majority of the population can understand what the news is about. But if you read books, I believe there's a range of difficulty depending on who the author is and the type of book you're reading. So I would think to improve your English, just simply read widely, and you will naturally, subconsciously get better at it without even putting in extra effort to memorize or to study the language. I will mainly focus on the essay component. I think that's what most people struggle with because it's not as structured. First, fundamentally, I feel that a prerequisite to get an A for GP is that you must have good grammar. I would think that even if you just simply mastered primary school grammar, that would be sufficient for the GP paper, because primary school grammar essentially teaches you the basics of grammar and all the tenses, plural, singular, past, present. I think those are the most basic things that you shouldn't be getting wrong. Assuming that you have great grammar already, the next thing you need to know is structure, how to structure your essay. Very broadly speaking, you need to have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. In the introduction, you should try to define certain terms that needs to be defined in the question. For example, if the question is trivial news is worthless, then I think there are a few things that need to be defined here. First, what is trivial news? Second, what is worthless? Worthless in what sense? Worthless in the money-making sense, or in the business sense, or in the knowledge sense? Because there are some pieces of news that are just simply funny, but do not add to your knowledge. But at the same time, these news do help publishers make money because these news are funny and they catch people's attention. So whether it's worthless or not, it really depends on which perspective you're looking at. Also, worthless to who? Trivial news may be worthless to somebody who is in search of data, in search of facts, but may provide entertainment value to the regular reader. In your introduction, it is good to define all these terms in order to give the reader or the marker some sense of where your essay will be going. And when you define, you should also be careful to note that it will make a difference whether you define it narrowly or broadly. So if you define it too narrowly, then your essay might be very limited. It may not be creative enough, or the points that you can bring up may be just too few because of your narrow definition. But if you define it too broadly, then you may also have to cover too many things. So the key is to find the right balance. I think for GP, it's very hard to give you any substantive advice. It's more of a broad overview, and then you have to try and apply it in whatever situation you are in or in whatever question that you are doing. Also, for the intro, usually people do try to give sort of a summary of what will be covered in the body. For instance, if you have 3 points to make, then in your intro you can say, oh yes, I believe that trivial news is worthless because 1, 2, 3. So there needs to be some form of planning involved. I know some people believe in spending a lot of time planning. Some people spend about half an hour of the time planning, but I'm not that kind of person. I believe that I think as I write, and sometimes ideas come to me as I write or make an argument. I'm not the sort who will spend 30 minutes planning. I spend about 10 to 15 minutes planning a rough idea of what I'm going to say. I will only just have very brief points and note down some examples that come to mind when I see the question. That about sums up what an intro should have. For the body, I think the main thing to note is the PEEL structure. PEEL being point, explain, elaborate, and link. And in each argument, you must have one PEEL. P being point is linked to the question. So take the question, technology is good for society, discuss. Your points should be linked to the question in that what is going to fill your body will be the reasons why you feel that technology is good for society, and also reasons why you feel that technology is not good for society. And if you think along those lines, then your point must be technology is good for society because it helps to increase efficiency. That is one point. Second, technology is good for society because it helps with societal progress. And then maybe your third point will be a counterpoint, which is technology may not be good for society because it causes people to be distracted. Okay, don't take these points for real and don't write this in your exams. They are just examples. But essentially, I hope you see what the meaning of a point is, and you must remember to always present both sides of the question, and that you must present points for and present points against. Like, this is a must. You cannot write an essay that is only one-sided, because that will immediately reduce your score and shows that you have a very one-track mind. These two things require you to have some form of knowledge because it's very hard for you to explain the point without any examples. And please give real life examples, don't give imaginary examples. Give things that are happening around the world. So for instance, in my first point, I said, okay, technology helps to increase efficiency. To give an example, I should think of something in real life that has happened to suggest that technology indeed helps to increase efficiency. Examples of this include how people in the past may take a year to get from Singapore to the US, but because of technology, now we can simply take 24 hours. In that sense, you need to know what's going on around you that is linked to this point so that you can bring up an explanation and an example to support your point. And finally, for L, which is the link, it is simply restating the point. So you just have to conclude. Because of all these factors that I brought up, therefore I can conclude that technology increases efficiency. One question that my GP teacher always taught us to ask ourselves is, so what? Every time you write a sentence, you have to ask yourself, so what? For the example I gave, the question is whether technology is good for society, correct? Just by saying that technology improves efficiency does not exactly directly answer the question, because you have to ask yourself, so what if technology increases efficiency? Does that mean that it's good? So you have to continue answering this so what question until you get to the point, which is that technology is good for society. Now returning to the example, so what if technology increases efficiency? Why is efficiency good for society? Because it increases productivity, because it increases output, because it affects the GDP, because it helps the economy, and then it helps the welfare of the people. Yeah, so all these reasons should also go into that argument of why technology is good for society. I will elaborate on the importance of having knowledge. So earlier I mentioned that you need to have knowledge in order to explain and elaborate. And every year for A-levels, there are very few common topics like tech, media, environment, education, politics and government, ethics. And I think for my A-levels, I chose a question relating to politics and government. The trick is to actually choose a few of these topics and learn about them. I think one of the reasons why I feel that there's no point in consistently studying for GP is because we are all forgetful beings, right? If we don't read a news with intention of remembering it or of categorizing it in our headspace, then the news will simply fly past us. So you can be reading news from J1 to J2, but if you don't know where all these news fit and how to use these pieces of news for your GP paper, then you are essentially reading for leisure and for fun. It's not going to help you get an A, or it's not going to improve your grade. So I would suggest that when you read the news, you have to read about topics that you feel you want to answer in your GP question, assuming that you're not reading for fun, you're reading to improve your GP grade. For instance, you may feel that, okay, you are very interested in environment and education. Then when you choose the question for your GP paper, you may want to choose environment or education often. And if that is your game plan, then you should read up news on the environment, like how is it going on in China, what's happening in Singapore, what's happening across the world. And also, if you're interested in education, then read up about education. Always go for the news that are related to the topic. And why I say choose a few topics is because I feel that it's impossible to master every single topic. If you are good in tech, you may not be good in environment. If you are good in media, you may not be good in politics. And some of the topics just do not interest you, because when you don't have a passion for that topic, you also tend to forget more about the topic, you tend to not understand the topic, and it will come across in your writing, because when you're not passionate about something, sometimes you do get writer's block and you just get stuck at the sentence, you don't know what else to argue, because it's not something that you really care about or that you're even passionate about in that sense. So choose a topic that you like and choose a topic that you think you will be able to elaborate on or argue about. That's exactly what I did for my own A-levels. I started too late, so I could only choose very few topics, as you can guess. And in fact, I think I only chose one topic. I was focused mainly on this topic of environment. But this is not to say that I wasn't reading news in general. I did still keep track and had accumulated certain general knowledge on other topics, but not in-depth knowledge. So on the day of my A-levels, when I flipped open the essay question, I was absolutely mortified because there was no question on environment. And I thought that was it. I was going to get B and below, because I know nothing about what's going on with the other topics at all. I don't know anything about tech, I don't know anything about media, nothing. The things that I knew were literally whatever knowledge I managed to cram in from the last 2 weeks before A-levels. Because of that, I chose a topic on government. I just googled, and my question was, the key criterion for good government is how well the economy is managed. Is this a fair assessment? The rest were about arts, mathematics, influential individuals in history, and then there's the usual question on technology. There's some philosophical question on humor. Can humor ever be serious? So if you look at all these questions, they did really try to make it very unusual, such that I believe there will be some people who did not actually prepare for any of these topics, aka me. So what I did in my paper was to use my knowledge for environment to answer my question as well. Because my question was super specific, that the key criterion for a good government is how well the economy is managed. And recall that I learned about environment, so I know that, okay, environment is something that the government should also take note of, not just how well the economy is managed. The economy can be going extremely well, but the way the government regulates environmental issues could be a complete disaster. So I use certain points that I know about environment. And the next thing I did was also think of how my other subjects could be relevant to GP. Like, thank God I took econs because I was also then exposed to the concept of equality and fairness. Basically the concept of how welfare is distributed in society. So I thought to myself, okay, I think another way to assess whether government is good is also distribution. It's not about how well the economy is, because the economy can be going really super good, but perhaps only a small percentage of the people in the country are benefiting from this good economy. Yeah, so these are tips and tricks for you to link knowledge you get from other areas or from topics that you've studied on to answer your GP question. For conclusion, it is basically just a summary to sum up whatever you have said above. Try not to spend too much time on conclusion, I feel. The main bulk of your essay should be in your body, and the content in your body should be substantial. You shouldn't be trying to sneak in some last minute points in your conclusion, because I suspect some examiners won't even want to read your conclusion if you're reading so many scripts. What about tuition? Is tuition beneficial? I didn't go for tuition because I didn't want to waste money. I believe that I could figure my way out through all my subjects. In fact, I didn't go for a single tuition for my A-levels because I was of the belief that in the end, it is up to you to study and not your tutor to help you study. I think tuition only helps with knowledge in that they will give you notes about certain topics that you want to prepare for GP, but in terms of grammar, I think you have to save yourself. For structure, it was just what I mentioned, you can learn that in a minute. So the main difference between someone who has gone for tuition and someone who hasn't is just knowledge, that you get access to notes and information that you can very well find online or just read it on your own. So it's up to you. I mean, if you have extra to spare, sure, go ahead and get a shortcut so that you don't have to compile your own notes. I didn't actually compile my own notes. I used my school's prepared answer for the finals paper and simply took the information from that piece of finals paper. And that was how I got through GP. Last point is that your handwriting is super important, because if the marker cannot read your handwriting, I'm not sure what grade the marker is going to give you. If the marker gets frustrated trying to read your work or decipher what you're saying, I don't think you're going to get a good grade, because it's just human nature. If you're already upset about the way the person writes and how you can't read what the person is trying to say, or it's very hard for you to maintain the positivity and still think that, okay, I want to give this person an A. I don't write in a super neat manner in that every word is spelled out super clearly, because that will be too time consuming. I think you need to save some time by not having the nicest handwriting, but don't scribble. Just make sure that it is at least reasonably legible, even if it's not beautiful. Now the burning question. If you didn't get an A for GP, does it mean you can't do law? I think it really depends on what is the likely reason for you not getting an A during your A-levels. If after much reflection you realize that, okay, it's because you have a poor command of English. For instance, your grammar isn't fantastic, you simply are struggling forming sentences, or English is just something not second nature to you. You take a while to form a sentence, or you will think in a different language and then try to translate it back to English, and sometimes you can't find the words for it, because that's how I feel for Chinese. I will think in English and translate it to Chinese to answer the questions, and sometimes even when I try to translate it, I can't find the exact word that I'm thinking of in English. So if that's the case for you, I think there will be a chance that you will struggle in law school, because your professors at law school will assume that you are fluent and you are confident in the English language. There is no time for poor grammar, poor spelling, and basically struggling to form a sentence in English. It will be a very big climb if you feel that you are at that level. But I think there is always hope in that if you are still interested to do law and you realize that, okay, my language isn't that good, take the time after JC and before law school starts to brush up on your grammar. And grammar can be learned with grammar books, grammar rules. I believe they're very basic things that you can simply put into your mind in a matter of weeks. But as for application, I would recommend that you read many books, because the more you read, the more it becomes second nature. And when it becomes second nature, you will have no struggles whatsoever thinking about things in English and forming a sentence. If you're someone who's already very comfortable with grammar and writing in English and all that, but did not score well, then check whether the problem was with the knowledge, the lack of knowledge, for instance. Like, if you were in my situation and you didn't prepare exactly for that topic, and if that was the reason why you didn't do well, I don't think that it is an indication that you will struggle in law school, because after all, in law school, the knowledge will be different. The skills that you need in GP are also the same skills that you need in law school in terms of writing, structure, argument, but the knowledge will differ in that now in law school, you are required to know the law instead of general knowledge or general ongoings of what's happening in the world. Overall, if you are really keen to do law, do pay attention to GP in school and do try to master the skills that you need to score well in GP, such as comprehension skills, writing skills, argumentative skills. All these are very useful for your law career and for getting through law school. Hope my sharing helps, and if you have any further questions or you're unclear about anything in relation to this topic, just leave down in the comments below and I will try my best to answer your questions. Yeah, that's all. Bye.